Welcome, Michael Gier, to the Veteran Summit. I am just so thrilled to have you. I saw your film, Wounded Heroes, and everybody needs to see this film. It is just fantastic. And I highly encourage everyone to really spend some time thinking about all of the issues that you brought up in the film, because it is really packed with great information. And also to visit your website for all the fantastic resources that you have. So first, let me ask you, can you share what it is that inspired you to do this film at this time?
Well, it's interesting because I knew nothing about post-traumatic stress when I started this project. And I actually, being very naive, thought it was something that only military people dealt with, not realizing that it's something that anybody can experience who's had a traumatic event. And hopefully I'm not the only person out there who didn't realize that, because I'll feel awfully stupid otherwise. But I've learned a lot since then. And that's why this film, although I started out for it to benefit veterans and our military, it also benefits anybody struggling or battling with post-traumatic stress, including our police officers and our firefighters, first responders, anybody out there, civilians who have dealt with a traumatic event in their lives. These treatments will help them get their lives back. But what started me on this venture was I was interviewing some military personnel regarding another project. And I had one guy in San Diego, Carl, I did an interview with, a veteran who was on, at the time, 16 different drugs, down from 18. And he was in his late 20s. And so I'm thinking, how is it possible that this young man is on that many drugs? And he told me they weren't solving any problems, the problem of post-traumatic stress. They were just helping him keep the symptoms down. He had tried to commit suicide, I believe, 3 or 4 times at that point, for sure 3 at least. I'm not sure if it was the 4th yet or not, but he had tried again soon after. And thankfully not successful, but the guy was just suffering and could not find a way to deal with and solve post-traumatic stress in his life. And I thought there has to be something out there other than drugs that are just, as he called it, a Band-Aid that isn't actually solving any problems. It's just keeping the symptoms down. There has to be a way to solve the problem and give these people their lives back. So I went on a search, and we've been all over the country doing interviews, and we found great treatments and programs that do give people their lives back and get them off their drugs, or at least most of them.
It is absolutely fantastic. And no, you're not the only one who thinks PTS is just for veterans. And actually, I have PTS, and I am a civilian. And I didn't know that I had it from a childhood experience. And we cover that in the summit too, that adverse childhood experiences can create a traumatic response in an adult that can manifest much later on in their lives. And that's one of the things that I think has been a revelation to me, is that you can have this compound trauma, so that you could be traumatized as a child and then go into the service and have a completely additional set of trauma on top of it. So I think what's really so important in your film, and the response that I keep coming up against so often, is it's the drugs. They don't want to be on these drugs. There are too many drugs that they are taking, and it's not helping them, and they are feeling helpless, and they're used to being active, in charge, alert, and suddenly they're being numbed out. And you had one of the veterans who was at the equine therapy, Saddles
and
Service, yes. And he said that he was on 27 medications and that he was so numbed up that he actually thought he fell down in the snow, and he thought, I'm going to die here because I physically cannot get up because of the side effect of these drugs. And the equine therapy that you showed, it was the first remedy or effective therapy that you showed. Over and over again, you hear the veterans saying, and now I've cut down on my drugs, or now I'm completely off my drugs. And that is so exciting, that these alternative therapies are really, really effective, and they are getting to the underlying problem. I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about Saddles and Service, because that's just an incredible program. And you showed the response so beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Well, there's equine therapy facilities all over the country, which is great news. The one I went to happened to be in San Diego because that's my hometown. As far as born and raised, I live in Los Angeles, so it was an easy drive to go down there and feature them. And I found out about them through somebody who interviewed me. It was a television show in San Diego who interviewed me about the film. And then they said, "Have you heard of Saddles and Service?" I said, "No, tell me." And contacted them, and Mike and Tammy run it. Fabulous people. Mike spent a very long career. I forget exactly how many years, 24, 25 years in the military.
Right.
Retired a little over a year ago, I believe it was, and did special ops all over the world. I think he answered to like the last 4 or 5 presidents. The guy's career and experience of what he saw was pretty extensive. And he had a lot of statements where he said, "I'd come home and or I'd be driving down the road and I just break down in tears for no reason." And he goes, "I don't do that." He's a man's man. And
Yeah.
and as he said, and he can say this, he's one of the toughest guys he knows, because
That's
he is.
true.
Most guys can say that, but yeah, whatever. This guy is.
No,
And so
yeah.
for him to pull over and start crying for no reason, he's like, "What is going on here?" And his wife said he didn't realize he had PTSD, but we knew he did. And I call it post-traumatic stress. We get rid of the D, the disorder.
Yes.
I mean, it may slip in every so often because a lot of people don't realize what PTS is, but it is the
Yeah.
same as what others call PTSD. We just don't think it's a disorder because post-traumatic stress is a very normal event in your life. Anybody who has a traumatic event, it's normal to have a response and have the post-traumatic stress symptoms. So
Yes.
there's nothing wrong with you if somebody's experiencing that. It's very normal.
Mhm.
So I met a lot of guys at this particular Saddles and Horses program, and I wasn't looking for people who were on drugs or had anything against drugs or who were for drugs. I was just interviewing veterans who were dealing with post-traumatic stress and treatments that worked in their lives. I can't tell you, almost every single time they brought up the drugs and how it was
Right.
destroying their lives. They brought up the drugs and said how many of their friends committed suicide, they believe, because of the drugs. And so that was fascinating when I wasn't even looking for that, and yet it kept popping up. So that is what the belief is among our veterans. And equestrian treatment, the reason it's great is because horses, they just they feel what you're feeling. And a horse can bond with one person differently than it will bond with another person. And the veteran said over and over again, the horse would just walk up to them, and they felt like the horse knew what they were feeling. One horse walked over to the guy he had just met and just put its head on his shoulder. He said the horse knew I was so broken. And there's just a bond that they can't explain that they have with these horses, and an understanding that these horses have. And many of these horses are rescue horses. And so, as many of the veterans said, uh, we're healing each other. The
Yeah.
horse knows what I need. I'm there to give the horse what it needs, and we heal each other. We grow together. That to me was so powerful. And they also deal with and work with police officers, firefighters, first responders, and veterans, and military of all types. But they're all over the country, and it's very impactful.
Yeah. And this particular one, there's no charge to the veterans that are there, which is remarkable.
Well, it's all donations. Of course,
It's
there's a lot of expense raising horses
of
and feeding
course.
them, but yeah, the veterans get it at no cost, which is pretty
Yeah.
spectacular. Oh, I'm sorry, when I say
So
veterans, everybody they treat, police officers,
yeah.
everybody, no cost.
Yes, yes. So it's important to support those that are doing this incredible work. And I think that the equine therapy and the horse therapy, the intuitive part that the animal has is just so incredible. And for the veteran, it must be a huge relief not to have to tell their story, not to have to
Yeah,
get into the pain. And I think that's one of the big things. The major thing has been, I don't want to go to the VA. Because they're just going to give me a bunch of drugs. And I
exactly.
don't want to talk about all of this stuff. And with
Exactly.
these animals, they can just let that go
There's
because
no
the
judgment.
animal,
There's no
yeah,
judgment. They love them. They accept them. They're there for them. They can relate to them. There's just a bonding that you can't even explain. And that's
yeah.
very impactful in the lives of these people.
Yeah, it's just fantastic. Really, really wonderful to see that and to see how effective it is. I mean,
Mm.
clearly when you were talking to these veterans, it was not just, oh yeah, I had a great ride. It was, I mean, one of them was brought to tears and you said it was really a powerful
Mhm.
experience. You're crying because it was so helpful. It was just
Ah,
moving. Yeah, it was
said it saved
just
his life. I think he said, he goes, yeah, it saved my life. It saved
yeah,
my life. But he's an Army Ranger, another guy
yeah,
who's a tough
yeah,
dude. And here
yeah.
he is saying, my life was miserable. It was PTS was destroying it, and this saved my life. I gave him my life back. That's powerful stuff.
It really is. And that is one of the things that I love so much about your film is that you really feel what they're feeling. I mean, you can see it in their faces when they're trying to describe to you what they've gone through. And I was on the same journey that you were on and didn't know a lot of different therapies, that alternative therapies that were available. But what I did know is that they were really crying out. They obviously the suicides, I've heard everything from 17 to 22 a day. And the response I kept hearing was, it's the drugs and talk therapy. And I'm talking to somebody who doesn't even know who I am, who
Mm,
doesn't even know what I've done. They've never been in service. So there's
mm.
this major resistance. But in these alternative therapies, there isn't. At least from what I'm seeing, there's much more of a willingness because they've gotten to a point where they say, look, I'm on 16, 18 drugs. I can't stand this. Yes, I'll try something else, especially if you're not going to give me more drugs.
Well,
That will help me.
let me clarify one thing, because this was also shocking to me through this whole little journey, at how many veterans, military people dealing with post-traumatic stress, how they are done trying
Yeah,
because they have
yeah,
tried things in the past, whether it was for the VA or who knows where else, and it didn't work for them. And so they get their hopes up, it doesn't work, and they're devastated, and it
yeah,
takes months for them to recover. And so many times they'd be like, I'm done. I'm not going to try anymore. That's
right.
where they can also be at a point where they're even more suicidal, because what's the point? I have no hope. So I had a number of people who were at that place where they said, I'm done. I'm not going to try anything else. I'm tired of the disappointment. And when they heard about something that looked like it could be beneficial and helpful to them, including some of the ones featured in this film, they said, not interested. And I asked one of the gals, I said, why would you not be interested? She said, because you don't understand how devastating it is for me to get my hopes up only to have them dashed. I do not want to put myself through that again. So I don't care how good it looks. I'm not interested because I'm trying to protect myself from the misery I know I'm going to go through if it doesn't work. And I said, but this one worked. And she said, I found unicorns. I
Yes,
love that line. She said
me too.
she found something she thought didn't exist,
Right.
but it does exist. There are every treatment in this film is a unicorn. They are treatments that save lives. Every person I interviewed, lots of them, with their amazing stories you can hear in the film, as you've heard, all
Yeah.
those amazing stories, hopelessness, suicide attempts, all of them said, my life, I have it back. I'm who I was before I joined the military. One guy said, I feel like a soldier again. I'm back. I'm me. Another guy said, all
Mhm.
because of treatments they found finally that was their unicorn that worked in their life.
Right. And I think that's what you and I are both trying to do is do the research for them because when
Mm,
you're in that state of mind, you can't do it. I mean, you don't have the energy to be able to do it. And my hope was to sort of create a buffet of different options, and it's like a toolbox toolkit.
mhm,
People say there are a lot of different tools. They're not always, one might fit another. It depends, but to
mhm.
know that they're out there, to see how they work and how effective they've been in the cases that you presented, there were two that I had never even heard of. So I was just totally thrilled to know about those. But they had like success rates of like 90%. I mean, they weren't just
Yeah.
mildly effective, they're hugely effective. I mean, that's just incredible.
And
And
not once or twice, regularly, that high
yes,
rate.
and the staggering thing is that one person, or well, actually more than one person, said they had one session and went home and slept 8 hours when they hadn't slept in 8 years.
Yeah.
And I thought, one session.
Mm-hmm.
That is just really amazing. And they didn't go into it thinking, oh, great, I'm going to be healed. They went into it with, being skeptical and thought, what is this crazy thing and how does it work? And,
Yeah.
and I'd love you to describe those particular ones that I'm talking about. One was ART,
Mm-hmm.
and let's see, that stands for Accelerated Resolution Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what that is and how you discovered that? Because that's really fascinating.
So accelerated resolution therapy, and I'll tell you, I had a hard time saying that when I first
Yeah,
started doing this.
ART.
And the
Yeah.
other one is RTM, Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories. How I
Yes.
remember those, I don't know, but they're similar. They may
Mhm.
disagree with me, but veterans who've experienced both say they're similar. ART does something where they have a waving of the hand in front of your eyes, and your eyes watch the hand, and that kind of acts as though REM sleep. When you're asleep, your eyes go back and forth in REM sleep, the deepest sleep. So somehow by talking to you and you talking back
Yeah.
while you're following the hands, it has some kind of effect neurologically. And what they're doing, both ART and RTM does not have the hand waving, but what they both do is you've got the memory and you've got the emotion associated with that memory. Through both of these protocols, they're able to get you to disconnect those two so that you still have the memory after the treatment. You just no longer have the emotion associated with it. So I asked a number of these people, so the ending, what happened, which I wouldn't
Right.
even come up with. There's so many great stories in the film, you won't
Right.
hear them, but they give their ending of what happened. And he could literally sit there across from me and tell me what happened. And he goes, I know what happened. I remember what happened. He goes, but I don't have the emotional connection to it anymore, which is what allows me to talk about it, think about it, not have nightmares about it. And it's gone. The memory's there, but the emotional impact is gone. So that's why that neurological event that's taking place, it's something
Hmm.
in the brain through these two protocols. And ART is fabulous, but you have to have your eyes both working so that you can follow. Not everybody
Right.
can. And with RTM, you don't have to have that, but both are great options. And the people I talk to, life-changing in one treatment. One gal, if I can
Unbelievable.
continue, if I'm
Yeah.
talking too much, stop me. But
No,
one
please.
one great story that I just loved, there's many of them in the film, but one that I loved was a Vietnam veteran. He got to his friend was shot right in front of him. He got there just a split second too late, and the enemy took out his best friend, right in front of him. The guy killed the enemy, but it was just too late. He just lost his friend, and he blamed himself because he was a split second too late. And so they were deep in the jungle. So he picked up his buddy and he put him over his shoulder and he was carrying him out. And they're like, you can't do this. You put him down. He's like, I am not leaving him here. I'm taking him home. And he carried him for over 3 days over his shoulder. And when she did the treatment with him, she said, you've been carrying him for the last 30 years, and the guy's an alcoholic. He drinks day and night. He's had a number of DUIs, and he was only sitting there in front of Myrna because the judge said, you have to go get treatment. Otherwise, you're going back to jail. And he sat down and said, I don't care what you do, little missy, was his words. He goes, I'm going to continue to drink because that's the only thing that helps. And he goes, it helps me not feel. It helps me not think. It helps me sleep. The little bit that I get, and I'm not going to stop. So do what you got to do. I'm not stopping. One session, he in tears said, you gave me my life back. You gave me my friend back. And she checked in with him the next day, and he said it was the first night in 30 or however long since the Vietnam War he had slept through the night. One session, life-changing.
Unbelievable.
No more
Yeah.
DUIs. He has his life back. He get a job again. All the things that changed because of ART in one session. Same thing with RTM. Same thing with SGB. Life-changing things with just one treatment. It's fascinating.
It's really fascinating. And what was one of the doctors you spoke with called it a neurological intervention.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
what is so cool about this is for a veteran to understand that this is not a personal emotional problem that you have. This
Mm.
is brain science. This is an injury to your brain, and they know how to fix it. And what I think is so fascinating and was so beautifully explained in the film is that when you have a traumatic experience, it's stored in a different part of your brain than other
The
things, like
amygdala,
the
they call
Great
it.
Vacation. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
great. And so, and what I found fascinating was that the reason it's doing that is because when you're in that emergency, you need to be able to call up all of those things very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just fascinating how the brain works. And the idea of being able to change what happens, to change the ending of that movie in the story that you were talking about, where the veteran was carrying his friend, she was encouraging him to remember all the fun times that they had together, even in the midst of combat, where they would do all these shenanigans, as she called it. And he was able to replace that awful event that he could not escape
Mm-hmm.
with a wonderful memory of his
Lots of
friend.
good memories. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where he was able to really embrace the friend that he knew instead of
Mm-hmm.
remembering the horrible event that was
Mm-hmm.
really crippling him. And yeah, it was incredible because it was so profound. And you would think, oh, there's just no way you're going to be able to get rid of that kind of trauma in one session.
Exactly. So after all those years, one session, that's crazy. And one other thing I think is really important to know is that people don't want to tell that story over and over again. And that's one of the
Right.
problems that the VA is doing. And I'm blanking on what it's called.
Prolonged, prolonged
Exposure. That's it.
exposure.
Yep.
Correct.
So they expose you to it over and over again, hoping that it would desensitize eventually in your brain. Well, what happens is most veterans drop out of the program because it's just unbearable. Some commit
Yeah.
suicide because they keep putting it in front of their face. They can't handle it anymore. So, they commit suicide. And there are a very few, but there are some that have success with prolonged exposure therapy. But the positive results, those who have them,
Mm.
are so low. I don't know why they continue a program like that. Every treatment we highlight in this film, you do not have to tell the story. You do not have to face it. They'll have you talk about it up to a point, up to any point that makes you uncomfortable. But with ART, RTM, you don't have to mention it. When you go see horses, you don't have to talk about it. When you do
Hmm.
ganglion block, SGB, which is a shot in the neck, you don't have to
Yeah.
talk about anything. So you don't
Right.
have to bring up those negative memories that have been so devastating to you. All you have to do is go in, they walk you through it professionally, and then you walk out after one session disconnected because of the neurological intervention, and you have the memory without the emotion, and all of a sudden you feel a lot better. So that's important for people to
Hmm.
realize. You don't have to face that over and over again.
It's very important because that was one of the things one of the doctors mentioned. She said, it's absolutely like a core part of this practice. This is non-traumatic. We are
Mhm.
not going to allow that as part of this treatment. And I love the way she described that the brain doesn't have the emotion part of it. The brain is the thinking, operating part of that. Although she said that the memory, it can include everything from smell, sight, hearing,
Mm.
all the senses, and that it's actually stored as Bessel van der Kolk says. The body keeps the score. The
Mm.
trauma is definitely right down into your cells.
Mm.
But what they were saying is that the amygdala is the one that's going to, fight or flight. But
Mm.
that is different, which is why they are able to do this neurological intervention, which I
Mhm.
find so fascinating. And it's not a sort of a blue sky kind of therapy, like, oh, I'm just going to change the story and pretend nothing ever happened. That is not, it is actually changing their brain in a
Mm.
way that they are storing it differently, processing it differently. It's not just an attitude which I think is incredible. And to be able to get that kind of result with in one session again. But they also said that the normal treatment protocol is anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5. Even that is incredible, because talk therapy can go on for your whole lifetime, you know, for freaking decades, you know, and so many people, I mean, the concept that you could do something that would not traumatize you, that doesn't involve drugs, that is highly effective and can be accomplished in one session, likely maybe 4, that is just, I mean, I found it just amazing. And as you said, those 2 therapies are very similar, but what the interesting point was that if you have an injury to your eyes or a traumatic brain injury so that you can't follow, that is why the other therapy is for those that have some kind of impairment to the visual part of the therapy. But it does the same thing, if I understand correctly, in terms of getting the memories resorted and what did she say? It's like creating a director's cut where you get.
Well, they allow you to, with both of those protocols, you pick the ending. So if the real life ending was your friend died right in front of you and you missed stopping it by seconds, you literally create a director's cut where you write the ending any way you want, and you got there in time. You killed the enemy, your friend lived. And as ridiculous as that sounds, because it did sound ridiculous to me, I'm like, and I asked them, I said, but you know the truth. So how do you just make something up out of thin air, what you want it to be, but that didn't happen? How does your mind accept that? And the way they do it again neurologically, the mind does accept it, and they do know the facts of what happened, but somehow emotionally they have the happy ending. So that's why it helps to disconnect. The emotional happy ending happens, even though the real memory knows what happened. But anyway, I don't understand it all because I'm not a doctor, but neurologically, it.
But the film explains, I think, really well exactly why it works and how it works, and I think it was the woman who was talking about the unicorn, saying, you know, that she had discovered unicorns. Was she doing the therapy where you're in the theater? Where you go
she was doing the RTM, and I do want to clarify, ART and RTM are similar. Some people like RTM better than ART. Some people like ART better than RTM. So it's not as though you do ART unless you have eyes that can't follow. Then you do the backup RTM. That's not the case. They're 2 separate organizations and protocols. They just do the same neurological intervention in a different way, but one happens to do the hand, one doesn't. The other one takes you into a movie theater. You sit there, you watch yourself on the big screen, and there's a whole thing that they do through the movie theater, watching everything play out. You don't have to talk about it, but you can see it as much as you want to. You don't have to see anything if you don't want to. And then ART, they don't do a movie theater, but there's 2 different ways of doing the same result of intervening neurologically. And one's not better than the other. People like each of them separately for different reasons.
Different protocols, different therapies. It's but the idea that understanding that it is the brain, and that it sort of eliminates right away the shame or the guilt, and there's just so much of that pain, survivor's guilt, and just the horror of seeing something that is an assault on your whole core being. I think that is something that they are really, really zeroing in on now. Is you do not want to drug and numb the symptom because you're not getting to the problem. And the problem, they feel this in their bodies. And so this is taking into account the whole person, because what's happening in their brain, this neurological intervention is able to respond to the entire bodily feeling. that they are having. And it is remarkable to see the people that you interviewed go from describing the event that they were trying to get help with, and then the result afterwards, and how there was a sense of detachment, but in a very in control way. They were really aware of what had happened, and it's not like hypnosis or something like that. They are aware, and their whole lives start over from, it's
Yeah.
like a complete reboot. And that sort of leads me into the next one, which both you and I have studied, which is the stellate ganglion block, SGB.
Mhm.
And I was surprised once I heard about it. I saw a 60 Minutes program on it, and I thought, wow, why doesn't everybody know about this? This is the coolest thing ever. And I interviewed Dr. Sean Mulvaney, who was the one who was a former or a retired Navy SEAL, and also a doctor in special operations. And he's doing that procedure in Maryland. And I was able to talk to him about it. And then when you and I talked about it, you did this really thorough exploration of it, because there were some naysayers that you had, come into contact with. And I would love for you to talk about that whole part of that journey, where it was sort of when all of this all of these papers were being written and all of this research was being done, and there was a holdout that really didn't want to say this thing worked.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that, because that was fascinating to me?
Yeah, I was surprised. SGB was one of the first things I found, and flew out to Chicago. I interviewed Dr. Lipov because he is the one who realized that stellate ganglion block could work in helping post-traumatic stress. And so he's been doing it the longest. And then,
And
of course,
we can describe maybe a little bit that,
what it is.
you say shot in the neck, and
Yeah,
that it's actually been around for a really, really long
since like
time.
1925 or something. But yeah, a long time.
Exactly.
And
And
Dr.
it
Lipov,
used to be used for women going through menopause for hot flashes.
oh
So
yeah, exactly.
they didn't have any problem giving it to them.
Right. And what they inject is the same anesthetic that they give to women who are giving birth, And
Yes,
so it's all
very safe. Yeah.
everything being used is yeah, it's a drug, but clearly if they're
Mhm.
giving it to pregnant women, it's got to be okay. I hope, you know.
Yes.
But
Yes.
what it is they're rebooting a part of the brain, and so the shot goes in. There's the bones that we have in our neck, and there's a C6, there's a C7, a C3. There's different parts, bones, and there's an area of a nerve cluster where they put the shot. And again, you're talking to a non-doctor here. I'm just talking from memory, from what the doctors told me.
Mhm.
They're the experts. They talk about it all in the film in depth. But
Yes.
the
It's
shot goes
wonderful.
into a cluster of nerves, and they're injecting anesthetic. They're numbing the nerves. And what happens is they stay numb for about 6 hours or so. But when the nerves wake up and start to no longer be numb, it reboots something in the brain, in the system, to where the trauma from post-traumatic stress is no longer there.
Hmm.
And now it's not a cure, because with stellate ganglion block, many times people have to come back for another treatment a year later, some as long as 5 years later.
Hmm.
But to have it's a 10-minute procedure, one shot in the neck, and then to get your life back for a period of time is a good solution for some people.
Mm.
But because it's involving a shot and considered medical, and drugs are being injected, there are people who are against SGB, really against SGB. And I had a lot of people asking me, do not include it in the film. But I interviewed so many doctors in the military who said the only reason they do SGB with their military patients is because it works. They don't get paid anything more to do it. It works.
Hmm.
I talked to the veterans who've had the shots, from your average person to a SEAL Team 6 guy. The toughest guys in the world who've had the shot said it was
Right.
life-changing.
Yeah.
I heard nothing but positive feedback from the doctors and the patients getting the shot. I heard a lot of negative from other doctors, but I couldn't find any verification of that from anyone anywhere.
Right.
And so after doing all of our research, we included it because there's just too much life-changing evidence that it works. And so we put it out there as an option. People can do their own due diligence and decide if they want to try that option. We've got other great options if they don't. But yeah, so that's why I put it in there. And people were upset at the 60-minute story, the people who don't like SGB, because they felt like they gave a one-sided story talking about this miracle, SGB, it's going to, solve post-traumatic stress. And they just felt like it was misrepresented and looked too much, not the reality of what they believe what it can do. So I didn't want to make that mistake, because I do think you need to tell both sides of the story in a documentary. And so we talk about all the benefits. We interview all of these veterans who've had benefits from it. But I also brought in all the questions and concerns that the naysayers had, because I felt like I needed to, for the audience, the viewers, to understand there are people who are against it. And these are great doctors, very successful doctors who really do care about veterans. So I should let the viewer hear what they have to say as to why they don't like it. So I asked all those tough questions, and I feel like the doctors that I interviewed who do SGB answered them perfectly. And even some of the naysayers, after watching that segment, said, I felt like you did that segment justice, where you gave both sides fairly, and you're leaving it up to the viewer to decide, And so I do think that we did a really good job in trying to present both sides so that everybody knows what SGB really is and what the problems could be from those who say there are problems, even though I haven't found any.
Yes. And I think you did a great job in the film too. Much more detail than my interview with Dr. Mulvaney, although I grilled him on a lot of different things just because I was so personally fascinated by it. But one of the things I think that was so interesting about learning about this is that this is not a drug this is an anesthetic, actually. And it's an outpatient procedure. And my understanding is that bundle of nerves that they are targeting, the stellate ganglion cluster of nerves, they are connecting like the brain and the body. And that what they are effectively doing is they are rebooting the fight or flight part of that just, you're jumping out of your skin. That is incredibly, and Daryl Hammond is one of the people that we also interviewed for this, and I sent some information along to him about it, because in his interview he said, I can't calm down. I can't calm down. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's describing just what is that feeling. And he said, they give me all these drugs, doesn't matter, I can't calm down.
Wow.
And it was so interesting, because I was saying to Dr. Mulvaney, well, this isn't the kind of thing where you get this shot and then you're going to go out and play in the street. It does not take away your fear. What it does is it resets you to normal.
Yep.
And you will have normal fear. But
when you need it. And they were all revved up, as you described that gentleman saying, all revved up all the time. And so by rebooting it, you're back to calming down and being normal when you should be normal, watching TV, relaxing, enjoying your family. But it's also there for that fear response to jump and kick into gear like we all have. It's back to normal. That reboots us so you're feeling normal versus always revved up.
Exactly.
Good point. Yes.
And the thing that was so incredible is that you can see this happen immediately, like within 5 minutes of the injection. I mean, because there is a shot in the neck, you can also get an anesthetic to knock you out, so you don't feel the needle.
Which I would probably do.
I would do. I would for sure do. But the needle is not just, there's ultrasound. It's you want to get the right doctor, as you so clearly emphasized in the film. and that Dr. Lipoff, their center, the Stella Center in Chicago, is trying to just make this available to everyone. And one of the doctors that you interviewed, Doc Springer, is also involved with Dr. Lipoff and the Stella Center. And when I was asking about this, I said, well, the uses of this, if you think about somebody that is living with that basically state of horror, 24 hours a day, they can't sleep, they can't concentrate, they can't have any kind of normal function. They're just jumping out of their skin. And to know that you can see that response where they just say, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. And then that's coupled with other therapies. So then you're able to, in that state where you're not triggered, then you can go in and have talk therapy or do
the benefits
therapy and get so much more out of it.
Exactly.
And it's possible that if you have a severe case, you could get triggered again, in which case you may need a second application. But the responses that I have seen and heard about, Doc Springer mentioned that she'd sent maybe 30 people to have this procedure, and they were all benefited tremendously.
Yeah.
And so I asked Dr. Mulvaney, I said, well, gosh, if you had, let's say you had a child that was a victim of sexual trauma, sexual abuse, it would almost seem criminal not to relieve this child of this fear, because they will go through the rest of their lives afraid.
Yeah. Good point.
And so the applications, I said, well, do you have to be a veteran? You know, can anybody that has PTSD, do you have to have a certain severity of it? And he said, no. He said, there's a checklist and there's a form that you fill out and there are questions and stuff that we ask. And I said, well, let's say I came in, you know, I haven't been in combat or anything, but I do have that diagnosis. And the point is that if you do it and it doesn't work, it's not going to hurt you. So it's like, okay, well, that wasn't effective. And what he said is it may be for in some cases, the left side, it works better on the left side, and on others, it works better on the right side to give the injection. So there are maybe other responses or opportunities to see what is best for you. But the idea that you could do outpatient and in 20 minutes be out of there, of course you have to have someone drive, but that you're not going to have all these drugs in your system. And a lot of people were able to get off of those drugs that they were taking to calm them down. And in your film, I believe one of the doctors said that the reason they are self-medicating with alcohol and, you know, any other kinds of drugs of recreational drugs is because they're trying to knock themselves out. And
turn off the amygdala.
Yep. They are trying to stop that part. And because they can't sleep, they have to just black out.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
cannot turn it off. And so it to me, it is absolutely worth exploring. And the effectiveness has, I don't know when you were talking to these doctors, but I did know that November 2019, I think, another paper came out, and they are now, the VA is now approving this as a protocol to be able to treat patients. The one fly in the ointment is they make you go through their protocol first, is my understanding. So you don't get to go directly. They want to put you through exposure and all this other stuff. But that's not necessary according to the doctor. He said, if you have this diagnosis, if you want, if you can pay for the treatment, then you can get it. Anyone can get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really good to know. That doesn't have to stop you
No.
from
The
getting
key
the
is,
care you need.
as you said, the key is finding the right doctor who is going to use guidance. That's what lowers the risk. You have to know
Oh, yeah.
exactly where the needle is going. You
Yeah.
want to have somebody who's done this a lot, like Dr. Mulvaney, Dr. Lipov, Dr. Tarabi, the great doctors
Yes.
out there. They do charge, so the charge varies depending upon the doctor, so you can research that. The VA has been doing it. I didn't realize they made you jump through other hoops before you can have it. That's kind of ridiculous, because
That's what I
you can't
heard.
just go
Yeah.
straight to SGB. But if that's the case, yeah. But it's a great, it's a good treatment as long as you do your due diligence and you find the right doctor. You don't want anybody out there who just says they do it. You need
No.
to verify especially that they know where the needle's going, because that's where the risk is. And it's
Yes.
so easy to know nowadays with technology. You just have to make sure they're using that technology.
Yes, absolutely. And the Stella Center is definitely,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
place, and they work also in conjunction with Dr. Mulvaney.
Yes.
And Doc Springer also had recommended him, because he said, at this point, he said he's done over 1,600 of
Wow.
these. So
I
yeah,
think I could trust him.
yeah. And also, I really loved to talk to him also about the fact that he was a retired Navy SEAL, because when there's this resistance again to treatment, he could say, look, it's like you broke your arm. If you broke your arm, we're going to set it and then just get on and let you heal. And he said, this is the same kind of thing. Something's stuck and we just want to reset it and just, get on with things. And because he knows what it's like, and because he was, had experienced and watched it, there is something about having another military person. They sort of cut through the questions. They get right to the trust part. They say, well, yeah, he knows what it's like. He's been there, he's seen it. So it's but all of these things are so freeing. They're available and so powerful. And in some cases, just like the equine therapy, that's all paid for. So, and to have all of these different options available, and to know that there are people out there that are so pulling for you, pulling for the veterans, pulling for the first responders. But like you said, this applies. All of these therapies that you have described in your film, they apply to all trauma survivors. All of them can benefit from this, no matter what it is that has caused the response that you have in body, mind, or soul. These therapies will work for first responders, veterans, victims of sexual assault, trafficking, any number of things that.
And it doesn't matter when it happens, as you said, even in childhood, 40 years ago, it can help today, these treatments.
Yes. And it's just so astounding and so wonderful to see the relief. And that's the thing that I just loved in your film, is you can absolutely see on their faces. And I saw so many tears in the film, of people's eyes were welling up because of the pain that they had felt, or they were welling up because there was a discovery and they wanted to be able to help other veterans. And they were thinking, why are we holding this back? Or tears because of the incredible relief. I mean, there was just so much heart and such an intimacy in being able to really feel what was going on. And you just captured that so beautifully in the film. It really, really powerful.
Oh, thank you.
I hope everybody will see it for sure. A couple of other things I definitely want to talk to you about is, where can they see this? How can they get viewing of it for their families, for themselves? Because it's coming up soon in November.
Yes, we are in the middle of October, so coming up soon.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we have the DVD. It's out, which I will hold up. Let's see if I can do it without too much glare. So there's the DVD
Beautiful.
that's
Beautiful.
available, and it'll be available on the website, which is woundedheroesdocumentary.com. And we're also going to be doing screenings, virtual screenings. We had planned to do theater screenings, which is why I've got, like, is it over there? Yeah.
Yeah,
Big
beautiful.
poster there. We're going to use that at our movie screenings, but we can't do that right now because of COVID. So we're going to be doing virtual screenings where a veteran organization can sponsor it. We're going to be sponsoring our own, where people can sign up for dates and times and then just join us to watch the film online virtually together as a group, and then do a Q&A afterwards. And I'll be on there to answer questions as well. And so that's going to be how we start. It'll also be available on Vimeo on demand. Possibly Amazon by November. Still waiting on that, but it'll eventually be on Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, Vudu, and on and on and on. It'll be all over the place so that you can watch it online. You can watch it using your smart TV in the comfort of your own home on television. Again, the DVD will always be available. And I think the DVD is going to also, what I'm hoping, it'll be used as a gift, because a lot of people who are suffering won't necessarily go online or want to watch it. But if you hand them the DVD and say, let's watch this together, or here's a DVD for you to watch, or a family member the wife or husband who said, my husband or my wife are struggling, they need to see this, buy the DVD, sit them down. So I'm hoping, people will use it as a gift. We're planning on buying a bunch to give out, as a gift, because I want people to see it, and maybe this would be a good way for them to see it. But it will be available, all those different options at
That's
some
fantastic.
point in November. Not everywhere yet, because we're doing virtual screenings. We have the DVD and Vimeo on demand to start, and then it'll expand from there.
That's just fantastic. And you can go, when you go to your website, you can also see a trailer of the film so that you can see how powerful it is. And you also have a tremendous number of resources that an entire list of resources that they can find out, different services that are available. And
everything we talk about in the film, we had to be able to give them, where do you go to get these treatments? And so the resources page has everything and more. And that's part of my problem right now, getting approved for iTunes and Amazon. They don't allow URLs. So they won't even let me put in our resource page, because it's a web address, and they won't allow it. And I told them, I said, you're like asking a person who's been walking around the desert for 2 days that there's water in the area, but you don't tell them where. And I'm like, I can't show people this entire beautiful film with all these amazing treatments and then not tell them where to go to look for them.
Yeah.
So anyway, we have a workaround that's going to work, but I was a little irritated in the beginning, because I'm like, they need to know there's a resource page. So there is a resource page that has everything in the film, so that you can see what you're interested in, how to get in touch with those people to give you that treatment.
Yes. And also, when you're thinking about gifts, I would think that this would be a gift that would be so great to give to your local library and to schools. So people would be able to have a couple of copies where they could go watch the film, or actually have a showing at the library where they can have a discussion group. There's so much material there. I mean, for mental health professionals, for veterans groups, there's a senior center near me that has a Veterans Day where people will come in and talk. So there's just so many applications to use that as a teaching tool, really as a way also for civilians to understand what's going on.
That's a good point. And just, if you don't mind me interrupting, one of the veterans told me, I can't wait to be able to show this film to my wife, because it explains what I haven't been able to explain to her. She's finally going to understand what I'm going through, what I'm dealing with, and maybe that'll help her, in relating to me once she understands it. So this film is also for the family members who may not get it, because the veteran can't explain it, but they can sit there and go, yes, 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 that's what I feel. That's exactly what I'm feeling. So then there's a better understanding and communication between loved ones. So that's another way this is beneficial.
That's really profound, because that's something I think that has been missing so much. And one of the things that I have heard, which I think is so profoundly true, this is like the only organ in the body where they'll throw medication at you and say, well, how are you feeling now? Instead of, the first thing they need to do is look at your brain. And that's one of the things that you showed also in the film, that I just wanted to bring up, was there was a QEEG, which is when they put the cap on your head and they watch the squiggly lines. And from those squiggly lines, the person who was interpreting them was able to say, I bet you're good at this, good at that, having trouble with this. And so it really gets down to understanding this is about the brain.
Yes.
It's not a personal failure. It's an injury to the brain.
Yep.
And even the idea of calling post-traumatic stress, it's a post-traumatic injury. It is an injury. And that just takes the stigma, I think, and the shame off of it. And once you can do that, I think these treatments, it's just really opens the door in an incredible way. And I did not know a lot about it, and went on the same kind of journey that you did, and did a lot of research. And I was just astonished. I thought, why are we not helping these people?
Yeah.
Why are we not helping them? There are all of these different things, and they're so cool, and they're all out there, and they're working. Why are we not making this available? And I wanted to collect it in one place, and you collected it. And it's through Doc Springer, who I have to give a huge thank you to, because she said, you've got to meet Michael Gier. Do you know that there's this other person doing the exact same thing you're doing? I was like, no kidding. So it was just.
I love Doc Springer, and she's in the film. And
yes, she is.
I met her through somebody else, and I'm so glad he introduced me to her, because she gave so much great, valuable information in the film during our interviews. And even afterwards, we become friends and we talk quite a bit. And she's just enlightened me in so many ways that have been so helpful. And she's got some wonderful books out. So really appreciate her. And do I have time? I want to quickly say one other thing about the three things, because this is what Dr. Springer talked about in the film. And I think it's so important because we have all these great treatments. In the very end of the film, I think I take about 8 minutes or so. What do you do now that you've seen all of these treatments? And there's three things that's really important for success. The first one is finding a treatment that is of interest to you. It could be what you see in the film or something else, whatever else is out there. You find it, do it. And then once you're in a place, a much better place because of one of those treatments, the next thing is two things. Surround yourself with other like-minded people, other veterans. Don't do this alone. It's just when you're in the military, you work together as a unit. And when you're ground troops and you need air support, you call in for it. You get that air support. So start looking for people you can work with, create that new group. Don't do it alone. Look for that support, people who understand, who are going through the same thing. So that's number two. Number three then is finding a new mission, finding something you can do that gets you excited about living life each day, waking up. So you've got the SGB, the RTM, the ART, and Brain Treatment Center, and all the other things we talked about. That could be step one. There's a number of programs we show in the film that are step two, where you meet other people and you start connecting. And then we also, and equestrian is a great follow-up. If you decide to do SGB, do equestrian, or RTM, then go to a week-long program with other veterans. You could do one treatment to get started, other treatments for follow-up, hook up with other people, and then find a new mission. That's really what everybody says brought them success, and Dr. Springer really pointed out and made clear.
Yeah, I told her that she's like the veteran whisperer, because she's just extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. She has an intuition and an understanding that is beyond comprehension. But her latest book, Warrior, is full of things like that are so enlightening and beyond those in the military. For anybody that is dealing with someone who's suffering from trauma, to really, she can, I said, you see things that other people don't see, and then you interpret them, and then you make them happen. I mean, it's just, she's really extraordinary in that regard. If you could let people know how they can help you, how they can support the film, what can they do to help you in accomplishing getting this film distributed in any way they can?
Well, this is going to be a grassroots effort. We want to just get this film out there to the people who need it. We don't have big budgets. My wife and I paid for this film. We had some
Yeah.
donations that came in from people, which was help through Silver Films, a nonprofit. But we paid for most of it, and it's been 3 years of our lives, and we did it for one reason, to save lives. And so we don't have a budget to do this big marketing campaign blitz. So we're trying to get as many press interviews as possible on our own, which we're getting some locally here in LA, San Diego. We'd like to get some national press, military interviews, podcast interviews with big followings. But the individual person, what you can do is just let your circle of friends, family members of veterans, military, police officers, firefighters, let them all know this film exists. And woundedheroesdocumentary.com will have all the places that it's currently airing and can be seen. You can always get a DVD, but it's all of us spreading the word and asking those family and friends to spread the word. And I think as it starts to go and spread, more and more people will see it. They can join us on screenings, the virtual screenings. Eventually, we're going to be back in theaters, and we'll do some screenings across the country that will be sponsored by veteran organizations. Because it's nothing like seeing this film in a movie theater. It'll be very powerful with a group of people.
Yeah,
That'll be down the road, hopefully next year, early next year sometime. But really spreading the word, letting people know this film exists. That's how I need help, because we can't do it alone. We don't have the budget.
Yeah, it needs to go viral for sure. And the other thing is that they can contribute, that there's some place to donate on the website, right? Where they can go.
Actually, I think there still is. Yeah, they can donate through Silver Films
to support it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that would be wonderful. After all the research you've done, after all of your heart and soul that you and your wife have poured into this film, and it is so obvious, it is really, I've watched the film at least 3 times, and I've loved it more each time. Even I start crying like when I hear the music. I mean, it's just
isn't it great music?
The original music.
He did such a great job by composer. So talented, and I love his music. I cried.
Yeah.
The interviews. Yeah. I've seen this film hundreds of times because I edited the film, and I still watch interviews and I'm in tears because I'm like, oh my God, their hearts are just pouring out.
Absolutely. And to be able to see that is so important to people who cannot understand and don't know. When you look in their eyes, it's just incredible. It's really incredible. I hope everybody sees this and spreads it around and lets everybody know, because we are the ones sending them to war. We are doing this, and you can't just say thank you for your service and have no clue what they're doing, because what they're doing is they're dying.
Yeah.
And they're dying because they can't get help. And that went right into my heart, and I know it went right into your heart. And that's why we have tried to do what we've done. And by linking together, I hope we create a movement that will get this going, of people who are getting involved and trying to help. If there's something you could say, if somebody says, I want to, as you said in the beginning of the film, or the beginning of the interview, you said, they just want to say, I can't do anymore. I'm done. I can't do anymore. What would you say, knowing and having seen the looks on so many veterans' faces? What advice, what word of encouragement would you give them to hold on?
It's so tough because, one, I don't think they're going to listen to me because I've not experienced what they're going through. So that's why they have to watch the film. Let the veterans who have been there, let the veterans who are exactly where they are now, who now have their lives back, let them tell you what made the difference in the change. There is hope. There are unicorns, and you can get your life back. But watch the film, and you'll hear it firsthand. You'll see it.
It's wonderful.
You'll see it in their eyes firsthand.
Yeah.
So there is hope. That's the main thing. But again, that means nothing from me because I never served. I'm a non-veteran. But the veterans and the police officers and the firefighters that I interviewed in this film, they're the ones who said, there's hope.
Yeah, there's hope. And it's thanks to you that this has been brought to their awareness. So they should listen to you. It's because of you that this all happened. So I cannot thank you enough, Michael. And I really look forward to spreading the word. I am definitely going to be out there letting people know. And it has just been a pleasure to know you and to see this brilliant film that you've done. Congratulations. And I look forward to being able to give it as gifts and
Oh,
pass it
thank
around.
you.
Thank you, Michael, and see you soon.
Okay, my pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.